Hey folks, I'm Spencer, and on today's episode of Cult Mania, we're looking at Ben Wheatley's pandemic-made horror film, In the Earth. Ooh. So, like I said, this is a pandemic film. It was written, shot, it's been released pretty much, all throughout, lockdowns and easings and all that sort of stuff. But I don't think you'd really know it. It's come out the other end feeling like a normal film. I don't actually think if anyone in the future watched it without knowing when it was made, I don't think they'd know, apart from that there's a couple of references in the plot. But even then, there are plenty of pandemic set films, so... Speaking of plot, I'm going to be quite... I'm not going to spoil too much. I don't really want to go into too much detail because it's the sort of film where the less you know, the better. So this is going to be some vague stuff. Basically, there's a pandemic happening. I wonder what inspired that. There's a group of there's a scientist and a park ranger that are going into a forest to deliver some resources to another scientist who's studying connections between plants in the middle of a forest. And then, you've got in the background a folk tale about this thing called Parnag Feg, which is an awesome name, and he's possibly the spirit of the woods, or maybe it isn't. So you've got science and you've got folk tales, and then things start getting weird. And that's as much as I really want to say about the plot. So yeah. No, it really is. It's the sort of film where I'd read what it was about, and it wasn't how I thought it was going to be at all. Which is only, from me just going, I've seen other films, this might be how it goes, and I got it completely wrong, so I'm just trying to leave that for everyone else.
You worried she's going to get you?
Yeah, who is it?
It's a local folktale. She's the spirit of the woods.
Now, it's also, because I'm trying not to give too much away about the plot, it's also very difficult to talk about the acting in the film, because there are 6 people that turn up on screen. 2 of them are side characters that disappear after the first 10 minutes. Which means it's really hard to say, this person's brilliant because, this isn't an accurate thing for the role, but they're so cacklingly villainous and it's amazing. Because then you just know that they were that role. Whereas it's about surprises. And I think actually, this is the great part of it. Everyone in this film has pitched their performance at a point where you start off going, you're normal, but there's something under the surface of your character. So you instantly sort of take to everyone and go, there's something not right. And that means that then as the plot develops and you start to go, you're the audience surrogate, or it's able to do small shifts that tell you a lot because you're already in that sort of unbalanced state around people. And this works. It works really well. I liked all of the characters, or I found all of the characters interesting. It sucks not being able to say specifics about people's performances, but I'm trying to keep everything as spoiler-free as possible. What I will say is, the film tonally has a lot going on. It's a horror film, it's got elements of sort of science, facty fiction, and halfway between the two. You've got comedy, you've got the sort of kitchen sink nature that a lot of Ben Wheatley's films have in them, where people, like I said, are recognisable humans that are fallible and say weird things or make bad decisions. But it all ties in really well. There are sequences that are scary, gruesome, funny, everything in there. You know, you'll be wincing and laughing at exactly the same time. And that works so well, because it means that, I mean, you know, it's a pandemic film in which that they are referencing the fact that there is a pandemic happening in the film that we are also living in. And yet, you just go, it doesn't feel down, it doesn't feel heavy, because you have those lighter moments and the moments that are more completely out there.
Someone's watching us.
God, it's hot in here. It's also a beautiful film. It looks absolutely stunning. I was, again, because I'd read that it was, you know, it's a pandemic shot film, you think, well, it might look a bit rougher. It really doesn't. Nick Gillespie is the DOP for it, and it's shot in this really lovely widescreen, and it just, I mean, it helps that it's been shot in lovely forest scenery that just looks great, because it's proper dense forest with, you know, branches snaking around everywhere, and it just, again, if you didn't know that it was shot in like 2 weeks or whatever, you'd think they'd spent forever making the forest look as brilliant as it could and taken hours over shots. It's just genuinely one of the best looking British films I can think of in quite a while. I mean, it helps. There's a lot of little zooms in it, and I love a little zoom. You know, just a little one where, like, you focus on one object and it just goes. So, I mean, it's falling into what I like in that regard, but no, it just, there's lots of lovely, like, really shallow focus shots, and it just, I'm sorry I'm gushing. I mean, yeah, it just looks fantastic. I don't know what they shot it on. The only thing that perhaps takes you out of that for a split second is there's, I don't know, a handful of shots that were clearly done on a different camera. But I mean, I saw this in cinema. It was my first cinema trip since February last year. You probably wouldn't notice it if you were at home watching it. I will say though, it's so gorgeous. Go and see it in a cinema. Support British film. Go and see it if it's still on by the time you see this. Yeah, it is just, it just looks fabulous. That's helped by the fact that there are some fantastic effectsy shots. You know, much has been made out of the sort of, that there's some trippy sequences in this. There very much are. They're very stroby. There is a lot of strobing. There aren't many films that I can think of that have their own epilepsy warning at the start, you know, written in the film's font. This one does. There's a lot of really cool stroby sequences that if that's your thing, this is, you're going to love this. If you're sensitive to that, be warned. It is very intense. There's also some fantastic practical effects. There are some gruesome moments in proper Ben Wheatley fashion. It sort of reminded me of Kill List in that the infrequent but incredibly impactful gruesome moments. That's the thing, it earns its gore because it does them in small little bursts rather than, you know, don't go into this thinking it's Tokyo Gore Police and there's going to be limbs being lopped off. It's very sort of impactful, nasty, ooh, gore.
What do you want?
The film has an absolutely wonderful Clint Mansell score. It is this sort of, it's a very synth led score, but almost that feels like it's covering a lot more ground than just saying, oh, it's an electronic-y synth score. Some of the sort of main theme and other recurring moments have these sort of repetitive sort of synth bass lines that feel sort of 80s inflected, which work really nicely. But then other moments are more sort of odd analog synth type sounds that harken back to a more sort of radiophonic style that are more sort of, I don't know, sort of have that stuff that would be on British telly that would be folk horror-y or sort of sci-fi-y, that sort of give you that sort of Britain as a heritage of this sort of film, and the soundtrack is sort of giving that to you. And then there's stuff that's just like, I don't know, if you had a Sun record and fed it through a synthesizer rather than guitar, like just proper heavy drone. That, I mean, again, see it in cinema. This film is so loud, but it's so good. Yeah, I mean, I think because I'd really wanted to listen to the score before seeing the film, but I didn't because I didn't want to paint a picture of the film. You can definitely still tell that it's a Clint Mansell score. There's just, I know I said it in the Rebecca review, that there's just something about Clint Mansell's work that just gives it that Clint Mansell-iness that I can't put my finger on. It's still there, but this is a very different score, and I really, really like it. Yeah, I can't wait to get it. I'm hoping there will be a vinyl release because it's excellent. In fact, actually, all of the sound in the film is brilliant. There's a lot of points actually where the sound and the soundtrack, you don't actually know which is which. You don't know a few points what's diegetic and what's non-diegetic. I mean, there's a lot of stuff where like the sounds of trees and wind and nature and birds and stuff sort of sync up in this sort of very musical way, and it's so good. But again, seeing it in cinema, I don't know whether it's just that I'd forgotten how good cinema sound can be, but it felt like being outside, which is bizarre. But I just think the sound is, everyone who worked on the sound design in this film really deserves, a round of applause, because it is so immersive. Hearing birds behind you or whatever, genuinely it felt so immersive. And again, it's something that marketing the film as a sort of pandemic-made film really does it a disservice, because I think it paints this picture that it isn't going to be as professional as it really is. It's just fantastic. Also, it's one of the best films for taking advantage of the fact that British wildlife sounds horrific. Like birds and foxes and stuff in Britain make horrid noises. And this film really takes advantage of that. It really builds a very, very spooky atmosphere that has this very classic feel to it. And just, it is genuinely unsettling. I mean, I went to see it with my wife, and she jumped within about 30 seconds of it starting, and many times throughout. There is it's not even a jumpy film, it just builds this sort of ominous atmosphere, and that's the cinematography, the soundtrack, the sound design. Everything about it is just designed perfectly to be really quite spooky, which is what we all love.
Wake up. Something's there. Listen.
I genuinely think this is, if this isn't probably actually my favourite film of the year by the time we get to the end of the year, bloody hell, there's something good going to come out. I absolutely adored this. I think it's up there with Kill List and Fields in England as my it's vying for my favourite Ben Wheatley film. It's only going to be knowing, does it hold up to repeat viewings that will confirm that. But I mean, I can't wait to see it again. It's a film where I feel like watching it a second time, there'll be a lot to notice. There'll be a lot that you go, oh, that links up with the thing that happens later, or not that there's only one thing that happens, but you know what I mean. It's a masterclass in making a low budget film on completely minimal resources. It also just points to, there are other films that have come out that have been made on this sort of small scale that you really feel have been made on a small scale. This really doesn't. It packs a huge amount of wallop. I just wish it was being supported a bit more by British cinema. The fact that there are 2 showings a day at my local showcase where I went to see it, and there are awkward times when you can still see films that have been out on VOD for months. But it really deserves being supported. So if you can see it in cinema still, go and see it and just prove that, British cinemas ought to support British cinema. Sorry, little rant over there. But no, it is absolutely fantastic. But no, anyone who has an interest in British horror, in just British cinema, should see In the Earth. It is absolutely wonderful. Horrific. Stressful. Funny. It's got a bit of everything in the best possible way because all of it works. I realise, again, there are a lot of people that it's not worked for. I don't understand how anyone can give it like 1 or 2 stars like I've seen some people on IMDb, because I'm just like, it's for something so immaculately shot with such fantastic sound design and a wonderful, wonderful soundtrack. I mean, something wrong with some people. No, I cannot do more than plead with you to see this film, and if you can see it in a cinema, do it. It is so worth it. It really is a fantastic welcome back to the cinema film. Just really bloody good. But that is just my opinion. Like I said, I know a lot of people haven't taken to In the Earth. Let me know down in the comments whether it's for you, whether you really liked it, or whether it just didn't work out for you. Let me know down in the comments. Like and subscribe so you don't miss any more videos, and I shall see you next time.